Hey, Scudo. Evening. How is that in terms of sizing? That's probably fine. Yeah, okay, I think I'm fine with all of that. Evening, folks. YouTube folks, feel free to go ahead and skip ahead about a minute or so here. I'm just going to give people a chance to join the chat since the push notification just went out now. And then I'll start talking about my experiences at SCG Con. Just to sort of fill the time, SCG Con was a lot of fun. The event was absolutely stacked on a number of different levels. Like, it was really a Magic convention. They did that right. Like, there were events from for everyone, ranging from like a major pauper event to like a specific commander side area to like main events for standard, legacy, modern, vintage. Like SCGCon was a hit. The place was absolutely packed on Friday. I was really amazed at how busy the place was for Friday, and that pace more or less held through for both Saturday and Sunday. So I very much expect that we will see another SCG Con about this time next year. Felt like a smash hit. So, like, going into SCG Con, I wasn't really sure if Brightling was the real deal. And Thursday night, I kind of had an, oh, fuck it moment. Why don't we go ahead and, like, test Brightling? So I grabbed 2 copies, I pre-ordered them, and I threw them in my deck list, intending to just, like, try them out in the challenges on Friday and then play them in the main events if they were good. Well, they were good. They were very, very good. TLDR, Brightling felt like one of the best cards in the deck. Absolute no exaggeration when I say that. Brightling is incredibly good. It will absolutely be a part of this deck moving forward. I think unquestionably. I don't really think it's going to be a flex slot. I think at least one of these is just going to be in the 75 moving forward. The card's that good. Hey, Rec42, thank you very much for subscribing. This is 5 months for you now. That means a lot. Thank you. Oh man, they're going to have another con already, December 7th through 9th? Well, that's awesome. I'm not surprised to hear that that was announced so quickly. So, I'm not just going to, like, sing Brightling's praises now. I'm just going to let it happen naturally as I go through the tournament report, and you'll kind of see what I mean by it. It does some really ridiculous things. So I have the deck list up on screen here, as well as below the chat. To just simplify, I'm running 2 Brightlings in place of Sarah Avenger that I was trying out recently because they're good and bad against many of the same cards, right? Like, they're both cards that are, like, good against Delver but bad against Baleful Strix, so they kind of fill the same role. To round things out with my flex slots, I added 1 Bryn Wingmare to kind of increase my percentage points against combo a little bit, and I thought it was acceptable to throw in another, like, 1 toughness creature since I added a 3 toughness creature in Brightling. Like, the math feels like it balances out there. This is also a 24 land deck because Brightling is very, very mana intensive, and I feel like the 24th land is good in the first place. Otherwise, everything that's in the sideboard is completely stock. I waffled on the surgical extraction for, like, removing 1 surgical extraction for something like a Pithing Needle or a Blessed Alliance, and I decided, like, if I run into some sort of Reanimator deck or lands deck, I will just be so glad to have those surgicals that I left him in. I kind of chickened out on that front. I don't know if the surgicals are like explicitly needed for the top of the metagames, sans like red black reanimator, but I felt safe keeping them, so I didn't change the sideboard despite my desire to. All right, so essentially I'm going to kind of do a round by round sort of like run through of like the highlights of what happened. This isn't going to be exhaustive or anything like that. Essentially, I don't have time to do a written report right now, with like SCG Con taking up my entire weekend, and with me moving, well, I have to be out by Sunday, so like my moving starts tomorrow. So I don't have time to write another article, because I already published one today. So that's up on Thraben University. That is sort of my like 2-year retrospective article. I also made a big announcement in there, and I'll repeat this a couple times throughout the stream. I am now taking applications for exhibition matches versus me. So if you are interested in playing against me on the stream as a way to show off your deck, and sort of like your mastery of that archetype, I am very willing to entertain those requests. There is a form for that, embedded in that article or linked to in that article. And please, if you have friends who are like high-level pilots of a deck, please pass that form on to them. I'm really looking for some great matches for the second half of the summer. No, actually, I want the opposite, right? Like, I want to play matches against the Julians and the Bryant Cooks and, you know, the Anurag Dasses and Bob Huangs of the world. I would much rather, like, play the really, really, really good players and show off some matchups. Like, that's what I'm really striving for with this. It's like, let's see how these matches are played at the highest level, and let's learn from them. That's what I'm going for. I already do have an application or two from some Elves players, so you're not exactly wrong there. Yeah, I've developed the nickname The Dean. That was not something of my choosing. That just happened. There's a whole bunch of like high-level legacy players who refer to me as the Dean while shitposting, so that nickname is probably gonna stick. I'm fine with it. All right, so let's talk this event. So I bought my Brightlings, sort of settle in for my first round of the Legacy Challenge, and I get paired against White Eldrazi. I thought I was playing the Mirror for 2 or 3 turns, and then I was mistaken. So game 1 was relatively uneventful. My opponent like hits me for 5 with a Smasher, and then I take over the game with Jete. Nothing to write home about there. Game 2, no, sorry, that was still in game 1. In game 1, I stick a Brightling. And I stick the Brightling, but I also had the equipment, so it didn't really matter. But the Brightling was threatening to do 5 a turn with Lifelink, which was super relevant. And in game 2, I made it all the way down to 2 life before I stabilized and won that one. I don't have any notes for the second round there, but it looks like I took 6, then I took 3, then I took 5. So I think I just like managed to aggro my opponent out in the air, if I remember, but I'm a little fuzzy on that one. Brightling threatened to do a lot in game 1. It didn't actually do so. I think I just like cracked my opponent for a bunch of damage after stumbling around their Thalia Heretic Cathar for a little while. This was like my first time. It was like, oh, Brightling's neat. Maybe it's playable. We get to round 2. Round 2, I get paired against All in Red. That is the mono red sneak attack deck that uses things like Seething Song to just try and throw a critter at you with sneak attack as quickly as possible. And game 1, I absolutely dominate. Like, I put a Revoker on Lotus Petal, and then a Revoker on Sneak Attack, and then I just deny my opponent's mana. They don't get to do stuff. And then games 2 and 3, I just got, like, absolutely aped. Like, in game 2, my opponent turn 1 Sneak Attack threw an Emrakul at me. Turn 2, I think they threw an Inferno Titan at me to kill me. Personally, I probably would have done it in the other order since they were on the play. Like, in case something somehow went wrong. Like, throw the Inferno Titan at me first, then throw the Emrakul at me and take a couple permanents on the way out the door. You know, throwing the Emrakul before the opponent has any permanents doesn't feel great. Hey, but what do I know? Alright, and then in game 3, I felt okay about what was happening. I whacked my opponent to 4, and then my lock finally softened enough that they, I think, hard cast an Inferno Titan to wipe my board. And I got rid of the Inferno Titan. And then they played a Sneak Attack and threw in 3 different critters. I think it was like Grizzlebrand, Emrakul, Inferno Titan, and I died. It's like, okay, that's fine. So the next round was Punishing Maverick. There wasn't a lot to say here. I played better than my opponent, and they were really punished for decisions they took. There was one point where I was about to get Jitte counters, and I had a Rest in Peace in play. My opponent had a Knight of the Reliquary, a Scavenging Ooze, and a Deathrite Shaman, as well as like I think like a Bird of Paradise and a Summoning Sick Mom or something like that. And my opponent decided to Abrupt Decay by Rest in Peace. And I was very confused. And I got Jitte counters. And so I went, kill your mom, kill your bird, go. And they didn't really do anything on their turn. And then I swung in again. And I killed the knight. And then I swung in again. And I think the game was over at that point. I talked to my opponent about it afterwards, and they said, yeah, I figured since I had like 3 or 4 graveyard-oriented cards, that would like matter, and that would let me pull ahead, but I was really wrong in my card evaluation. And I kind of like pointed back at that turn and said, like, well, what happens if you decay the Jitte? It's like, well, I have a lot of time to find another Abrupt Decay because you're out of an offense. Yeah. And then in the last round, I played against Red Prison. So this was the first time that Brightling just absolutely shit on someone. And there's no way to put it kindly. So I like nugged my opponent for 2 with something, and then after that my opponent just dies in 3 turns. Like, it looked like they were doing fine. Like, they had a solid board, they had a good aggressive plan, and then I played this Brightling. And I attacked in for 5 and gave it lifelink. And I attacked in for 5 and gave it lifelink. And we were done. And it was just really that easy. Or sorry, I'm conflating that. So in game 1, they had an empty board, and I just like 5'd them, dead them. And then in game 2, I think this is where they started out with some aggressive threats. Like, I think they had an early Scab Clan Berserker and like a Magus of the Moon or something like that. And then I threw down a Brightling, and I think I wastelanded them, leaving them locked under their Trinisphere. And then, like, Brightling just did its thing. Like, the first turn attacked for 3, and then it attacked for 5. And it was so good. It was just so good. If the creature's mad at your Jitte is the only goddamn thing that matters on the table. Oh, you're not wrong. You're not wrong, Basic Plains. Jitte is like destroy on sight good. Oh, it was Hazaret. They had Scab Clan Berserker and Hazaret. And Brightling just, like, raced the crap out of them. Was not close. Completely turned that game around. So I was at 5. Like, my life total goes like 7, 5, 8, 6, 11, 9. Like, that, like, the 5 points I got with Brightling were just, like, absurd in just, like, getting me out of the race. And my opponent's life total goes from 20 to 17 with the first Brightling hit that wasn't pumped, to 12 for the pumped hit, and then they died. Yeah, I don't know that I would board in Scab Clan Berserker versus D&T. I don't know how bad my opponent's list was, because that can really influence things. Scab Clan Berserker kind of gets walled by a lot of my stuff. If it gets the counter, it's pretty good. Like, as a 3-3, it's fine, but as a 2-2, it gets, like, walled by things like Thalia and Mirren Crusader. So I don't know if it's actually good at all in that capacity, but it's potentially better than Chalice. Maybe not, but, like, I could see someone wanting to play it. So that was the first Legacy Challenge, my only loss to All in Red. That's okay, that happens. Alright, so still Friday, I go and I sit down for a second Legacy Challenge, where, first round, I get paired against another all-in red player, another mono-red sneak attack player, different guy, which, statistically speaking, is really, really weird, but, like, whatever. So, game 1, opponent just, like, sneak attack, Inferno Titan, Emrakul, and I'm dead. Like, so be it. It happened. Opponent gained some random life with the Grizzlebrand twice, and I just lost. I was frustrated, though, for losing this opponent in the end, because in game 2, my opponent missed 4 different Chalice of the Void triggers. They had a Chalice on 1 and a Chalice on 2. And they, like, hard cast an Inferno Titan, I swordsed it. I think they, like, hard cast a second Inferno Titan, I swords it. And they put a Chalice on 2, and I think I resolved, like, a Stoneforge Mystic or a Thalia or something stupid like that. And then, like, finally I played an Aether Vial, and they caught that one. And I lost to that. Didn't matter. Turns out with the all-in-red deck, if you shut off all of their ways of, like, cheating in the fatties, they can still just get to hard-cast Inferno Titan mana. D&T has a really hard time just beating an Inferno Titan. That's tough. You know, like, say la vie, so it goes. I wasn't tilted. I just moved on. But I find it, like, super humorous that on Friday, the only deck I lost to was all in red. Alright, so move on to round 2 of the second Legacy Challenge. I get paired against Eldrazi. So, all I have written down for my win in game 1 is just Brightling. My opponent has, like, some small creatures on the board, and I stick Brightling. And my opponent kind of, like, does the same thing every opponent does, where I just, like, push the card towards them, they turn around, they read it, and then they read it again, and they go, oh, okay. So, I stick this Brightling, and I like, gain 3 the first time it attacks, and I gain 4 the second time it attacks, and then my opponent just scoops it up. They've had enough of this life-linking shithead. And then, like, we move on to game 2, and I just, like, stuck a Batterskull and won. For matches like Eldrazi, just having another source of life gain in the deck was so important. And it's not just a little bit, right? It's sort of like quick life gain. So you play Brightling, the next turn you gain life. It doesn't require any more... Well, I shouldn't say that. It doesn't require you to have any more lands beyond what you already have to start gaining life. Whereas, like, if you do something like Stoneforge, and you put in the Batterskull and your opponent doesn't attack, it takes, like, 2 turns to gain some life. Or if you play a Stoneforge and you don't have 4 lands, or, like, you don't have a second creature and you have a Thalia, like, there are these weird situations where you can't always gain life the next turn, and it's super relevant. Yes, we are talking about White D&T featuring Brightling. The list is on screen and below the stream as well, if it's not big enough for you to read it on whatever you're looking at. So like the main deck source of life gain was just absolutely stellar. Alright, so the next round I get paired against lands, and essentially this is going to be a good lesson in understanding the matchup. So my opponent, I think, goes like turn 1, like forest, exploration, some other irrelevant land, go. And I like play Planesvile or something like that. And then my opponent goes like turn 2, gamble. And in my mind, I go, fuck. Like, that's going to get the loam. They have their engine going. They have the inevitability. This game's going to be super hard for me. They discard some land. They play 2 lands, and then they play Molten Vortex, leaving themselves with 1 card in hand. And I realize, oh my god, he didn't gamble for life from the loam. He gambled for Molten Vortex. Holy shit, I'm going to win this game. So, sure enough, we play a couple of turns out, and my opponent doesn't have a loam, right? So they draw a card for a turn, it's a land, what do they use it for? Killing the threat that I played. So I'm getting this chip damage in at them, while they don't have a loam. So every card they're drawing off the top is a shock, but that's not getting them anywhere, it's only keeping them at parity. And I'm making more land drops. Yeah, so my opponent really messed up, and like immediately after, I don't remember if it was after the match or after game 1, I talked to my opponent about it, and it was like, yeah, I thought that Molten Vortex was going to be like unbeatable. I was really wrong. I messed up there. And my opponent recognized that they made the mistake. They just like overvalued having their 1 of Molten Vortex in the matchup, instead of just like going for a much safer, conservative, and harder to beat line. Now, if they had spiked a life from the loam or another gamble in one of their draw steps, like, yes, that would have been a very rewarding line, but without one of those 2 cards, they would have been hard-pressed to beat me. Game 2 was a slugfest. I surgicaled the Punishing Fire early, but my opponent then had a follow-up life from the loam. So my opponent, like, just like loamed repeatedly, but I had just enough disruptive elements to kind of aggro them out. I think like one of my notable turns involved them like playing a Glacial Chasm. I Flicker Wisp a Recruiter to get another Flicker Wisp so that I have enough power on board to flicker out the chasm and kill them in 1 turn. And that led to my victory. And then I played against Pox. So I'm going to assume that some of you don't actually know what Pox is at this point. So Pox is a mono-black control deck built around the card Smallpox, which is black, 2-mana black card, and each player sacrifices a creature and a land and discards a card and loses a life. So Pox plays things like Crucible of the Worlds and recursive threats like Nether Spirit that can come back from the graveyard, as well as some man lands that can come back with Crucible, so that it kind of like grinds you out and attacks your hand very, very aggressively. And cards like Liliana of the Veil can just take over the game. Yeah, Pox doesn't even run like actual Pox anymore. Red Panda, Air is all in red, another name for mono-red sneak attack. Oh yeah, if you hate everyone, Pox is a great deck to play, because you disrupt everyone's strategy, like, cripplingly well. So, game 1, I stick a Thalia, and my opponent flops around and dies. Thalia does that sometimes. Game 2, one of my friends walks by to see the start of this match, and my opponent on turn 1 goes, Dark Ritual, Liliana of the Veil plus. And my friend just, like, walks away and is like, nope, he's not getting this one. And sure enough, it took a while, and I managed to crack my opponent down to 9. But that turn 1 Lily was just, like, too devastating, and even after revokering it, it eventually died, and, like, that was that. Turn 1, feeling pretty good. I think I play, like, Plains Aether Vial or something like that, and my opponent goes, Dark Ritual Liliana. Fuck. again with this. But I think this time it was Liliana Last Hope. So my opponent had, I think my opponent had turn 1 Lily Last Hope, and I Revoker it on turn 2. I think they Edict it or something like that, and keep throwing the Lily up. And then a Council's Judgment that Lily, and then my opponent was, like, relatively speaking, out of gas. Like, they had other things that were disrupting me, but their hand was kind of all in on the Lily, and I managed to beat it and secure that win. So on Friday, I went 6-2. You know, 75%. That was great. Felt very, very comfortable with the deck list. So I signed up for the Duel for Duels event, and everything kind of went wrong there. It'll kind of make sense why it went wrong in a second. Alright. So, in the Legacy challenges, I expected to play against, like, literally anything. I consider the challenges like the wild, wild west, right? Like, people are just going to play whatever deck they want to play or whatever deck they want to screw around with because, like, it's a $20 entry fee. It doesn't matter. It's paid out in, like, prize wall tickets. It's whatever. But for the Duels for Duels events, I expected a real metagame. See, that's where I was mistaken. Oh, it was a very, very fun thing. Oh, yeah, dinner recap. So, Friday night, we have this D&T meetup, and we have a handful of guys get together, and we're talking about D&T, and a couple of us decide we're going to go out to dinner. So we decide we're gonna go to this place called Moe's. They have burritos there. It's right next to a little, like, brewery in town. Gonna be nice. Well, I had picked something like 7 minutes away from the convention center so that, like, we wouldn't have a lot of, like, people there from the convention center and it'd be out of the way. Turns out that there was a concert right next to there that I didn't know about. So parking was abysmal. I ended up, like, parking 3 blocks away from the location and, like, walking to get food. Which for Roanoke is pretty absurd because, like, it's a small enough place that, like, you just park in front of, like, literally wherever you want to go and it's fine. But it was really neat. I don't know, we probably spent like an hour and a half or 2 hours in Moe's just, like, chatting about, like, sideboarding and stuff. It was very, very helpful. Oh, so Doc, Red Prison uses lock pieces like Trinosphere and Blood Moon and Magus of the Moon to slow down the game, whereas All in Red essentially goes like Pyretic Ritual, Seething Song, Sneak Attack, Grizzlebrand, Draw 7, Lotus Petal, Emrakul, Huzzah! So All in Red, like, says, alright, like, do you have a Force of Will? Because if so, I'm probably dead, but I'm just, like, going for this win right now as fast as I can. Whereas the Red Prison deck tries to drag on the game for a very, very long time with lock pieces. Yeah, Worldspine Worm is another good option for that. I'm more afraid of Inferno Titan, for obvious reasons. Yeah, but the meetup was cool. It was pretty small. Like, there were a lot of people who wanted to go, but then they, like, decided to register for, like, an F&M event, or, like, the 7 p.m. challenge, or they got caught up on site, or they wanted to do dinner with other friends. So there were a lot of people who were like, hey, did I miss the meetup? And then I was like, yeah, you missed it just yesterday. So I'll try to organize it a little bit better next time, but it was just a little bit hard to try to plan something when I didn't know exactly when the Legacy Challenge was going to end, and I really wanted to play in with 2 of them. Alright. Anyway, so moving on to the Duel for Duels. I get paired against Mud in round 1. And I thought everything was fine. Like, with Mud, that is, like, the Metalworker deck, you're never really sure how safe you are. I thought I had my opponent locked down pretty well. Like, I had their mana somewhat squeezed. I had hit them for a lot of damage. They were at 4 life. They played an Ugin, wiped my board. I revoked the Ugin. I was feeling pretty good. And then my opponent tapped 6 mana and played a Walking Ballista for 3, and my world fell apart. Like, I had lethal on board, I thought everything was fine, and then this Ballista comes down and is like, alright, wipe your board, now I have Ugin, plus Ugin, and I just couldn't bring it home from there. I put up with a couple turns worth of Ugin, and then I packed it in once my opponent played another threat. So, go on to game 2. This was frustrating. So I got my opponent down to 9. I was feeling pretty good, and then the first thing slips through the cracks. My opponent plays this Platinum Empyrean, and I'm like, okay, this is annoying, but this is beatable. So for anyone not familiar with Platinum Empyrean, it says, I should look up the exact wording before I say this because there are two very similar cards. Platinum Empyrean and Platinum Angel. Alright, so Platinum Empyrean is your life total can't change, and it's an 8 mana 8/8. So Platinum Empyrean slips through, and I'm not too worried. I have ways that I can deal with this. And I tutor up a Leonin Relic Order on my next turn, and the following turn I was going to, like, Violet in and wreck my opponent. And then my opponent draws fucking Lightning Greaves and throws Lightning Greaves on Platinum Empyrean. And I was unhappy, but I'm like, this is still fine. This is okay. I can beat this still. All I need to do is get a Flicker Wisp. And I can go ahead and, like, Flicker Wisp out the Greaves, and then like, use my Relic Order to get rid of the Empyrean, and then I can crack for lethal. My opponent's at 9, so, like, dealing 9 in a turn wasn't going to be unreasonable. Then my opponent top decks Cold Oath of Forge Master. And I go, uh-oh. So my opponent, like, moves the Greaves over to Forge Master, activates, gets a Blightsteel Colossus, puts the Greaves on Blightsteel, and swings in with both. And I was in the situation where I had to, like, chump block the Blightsteel with one of my best creatures. I think it was like a Mirror Crusader, so I didn't die. And then I also had to block the Platinum Empyrean, which left me with not very many creatures on board. So even if I got rid of the Empyrean, I couldn't crack for lethal. I think my opponent was at 11, and I could crack for 10 back, I believe. Because I think I had like a Sword of Fire and Ice or something like that. So I was literally 1 point of damage short from winning that with, like, the cards I had in hand for Disruption. A warrior's death. Death by infect counters 11 at a time. No, it was sweet. So I was not disappointed with my loss. Like, my opponent played well and played to their outs. I played well. It was a very good match of Magic. But here's this unfortunate thing, right? So, like, now I'm sent into the loss bracket where God knows what I'm going to play, but it's probably not going to be the things that I want to be playing, right? Like, with D&T, you want to win your first 2 rounds so that you're playing against, like, the meta decks. And that's not what was going to happen to me for the rest of the day. Alright. Oh man, the Mud deck is really sweet. So there's sort of like, I think there's 2 primary ways to build Mud, at least in the past. I think there's 3 now, actually. So I think in the past you had to make your choice between, like, am I playing big mana, stupid big stuff Mud? Or am I playing, like, ultimate lock, like, smoke stacks you out Mud? Where you could choose whether you wanted to go, like, the fatty-oriented or lock-piece-oriented. And now I think there's also a third option that involves Karn. Because I think just, like, Karn minus is probably, like, stupid good in that deck. So I might, like, play some on-stream with Mud at some point. I think that'd be fun. Mud is colorless Nick Fit. Okay, that's a good comparison. All right, so round 2, I get paired against Eldrazi. This opponent was insane. He was so good. I don't remember his name. I know he was from Toronto, and he played so well. So in game 1, I think I get a Batterskull out very early. I think I get a Batterskull out on like turn 3, and my opponent persists and plays through it. So like my life total goes like 20, 18, 14, 9, 13, 8, 14, 20, 12, 18. So like there was this like up and down for a little while where my opponent was like trying to go and reasonably fight through this this Batterskull. And they didn't, but it was very, very, very close. So time to add Serenity to the sideboard, get those Mud players. That would have done it. All right, so game 2. I think I stick a turn 3 Brightling. And my opponent does what everyone does, like, takes a look at it, reads it, and then plays Sorcerous Spyglass and names Brightling. And that was the winning play. Like, that Brightling absolutely would have taken over the game without a doubt. And that Sorcerer's Spyglass shutting it off was very important. And like in day 1 of the event, I had the feeling that Brightling was great, so I tried it again. And like sure enough, this was a sign. Like I had an Ether Vial, and my opponent named Brightling with Sorcerous Spyglass. That should give you perspective on like how much we both valued this card. Is Batterskull great because it fights most things from Eldrazi really well due to its size? Yes. So if you can stick a Batterskull, that beats most reasonably sized Endless ones, Matter Reshapers, Eldrazi Mimic, and trades with Thought-Knot Seers. They can go bigger than that, so you can see Oblivion Sowers and Endbringers and Reality Smashers that beat it. But here's the problem, right? So like the game goes long, Batterskull chumps, gains 4, or causes them to hold back a bunch of damage, and then you just put it on something else. And then you end up with, like a 7-power Flicker Wisp with Lifelink and Vigilance that's unbeatable, or like a 6-power Thalia with First Strike and Lifelink, and like they can't get the Batterskull off the table once it's there. They can only do something like Sorcerous Spyglass it. So it's very good inevitability. So game 2 is super interesting. Essentially, here's the situation. My opponent has a Reality Smasher in hand. And I have a very strong board, and my opponent has the read that I have Swords to Plowshares. If they go for the Reality Smasher, and I get to remove it, the game is over, and my opponent has no chance to win. I think the opponent actually knew that I had the Swords to Plowshares due to the Sorcerer's Spyglass, now that I'm thinking back to it. So they know about the swords, and they play around it. They wait until they draw a Thought-Knot Seer to Thought-Knot Seer me, and then I have to remove that in response to its trigger. And then the next turn they play the Reality Smasher, which gets to start chipping away at me. So because my opponent respected my removal and played around it, they won that game. So it was a combination of like very tight play and role recognition from my opponent, as well as Sorcerous Spyglass on Brightling. And then in game 3, essentially, I have Batterskull in my hand, and I play a turn 2 Stoneforge going for Jitte. And this was after, or I guess it was turn 3 Stoneforge, because I did a Wasteland on my opponent. And I fetched Jitte. So I'm trying to get my opponent to not Thought-Knot Seer me right now, if at all possible. I'm trying to like make it look like I don't have the Batterskull. And they had the Thought-Knot Seer and took the Batterskull, and I lost the game in short order from there. And that was that. So this is not how I was planning on starting out this event. It was very disappointing, but I always try to fight it back. And let's look at this here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. In my 11th round, I finally played a blue deck. All right, we finally get paired against the sort of things that I was prepping for, and we play against Bug Delver. Craig Swanson. Is that the Eldrazi player? That name sounds vaguely familiar. If he's an Eldrazi player from Toronto, then that was him. He was an amazing pilot, like absolutely brilliantly played. I have mad respect for how well he played that game. One of the better matches I've ever played against Eldrazi in terms of like being interesting. I guess I could like go and look at my pairings, but I don't quite care that much. Okay, so playing against Bug Delver, and my opponent plays turn 1 Delver and it blind flips, and then my opponent plays turn 2 Delver and it blind flips. Fuck, not like this, and I just like lose game 1 in short order. I have plenty of cards, but I absolutely am just like too far behind on board. I make a micro misplay here, and I flicker wisp the wrong target, but it didn't matter. Like I think I was, so I took 3, then 6, then 6. So like I took 14 damage before I really had anything that could even do like attempt to deal with the Delvers. So I was just donezo already. So that was that. And then games 2 and 3 both played out the same way. I played Rest in Peace, and then I played a piece of equipment, and the game was done. Bug Delver is so much more reliant on the graveyard than Grixis Delver, so when you go and shut that off, it's just easy. So like in game 2, my opponent didn't even get to do any damage to me, and in game 3, like they hit me to 7, but then I gained. Well, I went from 7 to 13 life, so I don't know exactly what happened. I think that was like when I had like a Batter Skull with a sort of Fire and Ice on it, or something like that. But I just clawed myself out of that one very, very easily. All right, so then I get paired against Ant. Game 1, I'm on the play. I stick turn 2 Thalia. I win. Game 2 was Ultimate Daggers. So I disrupt my opponent, and they go for an awkward ad nauseum kill, and they stop at 2 life, not being able to go for it. And they do a couple of things, and they rip apart part of my hand and set themselves up for a kill the following turn, but they have to leave me with a Canonist. So they are at 2 life, and I play Canonist. And then I pass the turn back to them. My opponent has already Chain of Vapored my Canonist once, or maybe it was like they Chain of Vapor to Thalia, and then I think they took the Thalia. So, like, there's already a Chain of Vapor in their graveyard, and I know that they can't cantrip for another Chain of Vapor, right? Because if they cantrip for it, then they can't cast it on their turn. And then on my turn, I attack, they have to bounce it in order to get it off the table. So, in order for them to not be dead, their draw for turn has to be their other Chain of Vapor. So, they draw for turn, and it is the other Chain of Vapor. And they Chain of Vapor the Canonist, and they go off. So they steal game 2. Or maybe they don't steal it. Like, maybe it was sort of like a back and forth stealing, where like their ad nauseum didn't work, so I stole it from them, and then like they stole it right back from me. So like maybe there's some back and forth stealing there. But it's okay, right? Like I get my next game on the play, So I keep a hand that has a turn 2 Thalia, and my opponent leads on Gataxian Probe, Cabal Therapy for Thalia, and I die. And Ant is such a huge coin flip matchup. It is like the closest matchup over time I've ever had to having like literal 50-50 results. And I was on the wrong side of it here. But luckily, due to well, I shouldn't say how small, due to the nature of like running multiple events side by side, most of the individual events weren't that big. So X3 was still going to make the duel for duels like day 2. So I'm fine with like playing on. So I move on. And then I get paired against the mirror. So it's accurate to say that I'm more experienced at the mirror than most other D&T players. And I got paired against a relatively new player in this round. Air is all in red, mono red sneak attack. So I get paired against this D&T player who's not overly familiar with the matchup. I know this because he plays a turn 2 Stoneforge, and I'm going, shit, 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 shit. And he fetches Batterskull. And I'm like, yes! Everything's fine for now. Unfortunately, a few turns later, he plays another Stoneforge and gets Jitte. And I'm like, okay, this is bad, but okay. And my opponent, I don't have an answer to Jitte at this time. But I'm holding up this white mana, and my opponent just attacks me with Batterskull instead of going for the Jitte whip. Like out of fear of like a Swords of Plowshares blowout that like totally doesn't matter because the game ends on the spot if like they connect with Jitte counters. So I'm like stone cold dead to just like equip Jitte and swing, and my opponent does not do it. And then I slam a Brightling, and I'm holding up mana now. And this Brightling now invalidates the equipment on the other side, right? Because my opponent can't get any Jitte counters without a flyer. Because if they go and put on the Batterskull and attack in, I just block with Brightling and bounce it. And I had an Ether Vial, so I could just put it right back in. And so this Brightling completely warps the game around it. And I get my own equipment online, and I just decimate my opponent. So my opponent had like every opportunity to win the matchup. And they had the tools to do it. They had the best card in the matchup, but they played too scared and lost because of it. Yes, Killing Form, Brightling is legit. Very, very, very legit. I don't, well, I'll talk about my conclusions about the card at the end, because they're very positive. Okay, so then game 2 happens, and essentially my opponent, like, does some chip damage to me, but they sideboarded poorly. And, like, they had Thalias still in their deck. And so I just had better cards than they did and more relevant cards. And, like, they played a turn 2 Thalia. I played a turn 2 Stoneforge. You know, they then, like, get a couple chip shots with Thalia, but eventually have to hold it back. And then, like, at some point, I get a Caracas, I get to bounce that Thalia, and we're just done. Alright. Then I get to play against Checkpile. Long story short here, Brightling wins game 1. In game 2, my opponent mulligans to 4, and then draws... Like, I swear my opponent demonic tutored every turn of the game for free after this point. So, yes, Killing Form, you should order 2 Brightlings. So my opponent leads on, like, Swamp Deathrite Shaman, then turn 2 him to Turox me, taking my second land, buying them, like, 3 turns before I do anything, as I brick on lands. And they draw into, like, Baleful Strix into Baleful Strix into K Command into 2 planeswalkers, and I just, like, lose. Opponent drew extremely hot after that mulligan. Like, amazingly so. And so we move on to game 3. And the clock was kind of low because game 2 took forever. Like, I have 2 columns worth of, like, life totals for this matchup. Because I was doing very well despite, like, getting my only other land hymned. I still was doing fine. I was putting pressure on my opponent, but they got 2 planeswalkers online, but still were having difficulty closing out the game. Well, I'll give you my full conclusion on Brightling in a few minutes. I don't think you can play more than 2, but I'll get to that. So we get to game 3, and we get into turns. And my opponent is at 12 life, I think, at the time. And I realized that there is literally no way for my opponent to beat me in the number of turns they have. Just like the math works out, they cannot kill me. I'm at like 19 or something absurd like that. So pile cannot finish in 2 turns. But in 3 attacks, I can kill my opponent. So I attempt to go for a win. And, like, in going for the win, I know that I can, like, completely expose myself to, like, blowouts. Because, like, I have a Brightling in hand, I have a Mom on board, I have a Batterskull on board. Like, if this game were to go on, and I just, like, played at a normal, reasonable pace, I was very, very, very favored to win. But that's not where we were at. So, like, I go for protection on, I think, like, a Batterskull Germ, crash in, and, like, I get my opponent to 5, and then they, like, I think they, like, K-command a couple of my things, and, like, Jace bounce a thing or something like that to buy some time, and then we get to turns, and neither of us want to concede, so we just take the draw. And then, like, we take the draw, and I drop from the event. And my opponent got super salty and was like, well, why didn't you drop? I was so far ahead at the end. Well, why were you ahead? You were ahead because I took an incredibly risky line for multiple turns in order to try to win the game. So my opponent was very bitter about me not conceding to them there, because, like, they felt like they were just, like, a clear favorite to win when they really weren't. They just looked like they were a favorite to win because I was trying to win, not draw. So that was an unimpressive event there. But that was okay. Like, I had the rebound for the Legacy Classic the next day. I need another drink of water before I do this. There's a lot of talking. Boo-hoo, guy who rolls to 4 and wins anyway. Yeah, that was kind of my thoughts as well. Okay, so round 1 of the day. Go to my pairing, or go, like, take a look at my phone, recognize the guy's name. I know I played him yesterday. Take a look at him. And this poor guy who played the mirror yesterday has to play the mirror again against me in round 1 of their tournament. So that was not a good start for him. It was uneventful. Both times I just won the equipment war. But my opponent made a lot of small mistakes, and I talked to him about it afterwards. Like, he missed porting me for, like, 3 turns, and on 2 of the turns, the mana mattered a lot. Yeah, it was full-on bully mode. Like, it was not close. Not gonna beat the guy up there. All right. So round 2, I go and I play against Red Prison. So This was the first time that I had played Brightling against Ensnaring Bridge, and I lost some tempo due to messing up Brightling math. Like, I thought I couldn't kill a Chandra, but I actually could kill the Chandra, and I missed an opportunity to do so. And it was a huge fuck up on my end. So I just, like, did the math wrong mentally in my head, and I 100% accepted that, like, I messed up. So, like, just for some reason, I had, like, doubled down on the amount of math that I was doing, and just, like, thought, oh, I can't kill a Chandra this turn. I'll just play another thing. And I gave my opponent, like, one more turn with the Chandra than I needed to, and it was super costly. I ended up losing that game, not necessarily to that Chandra, but I think my opponent, like, ripped a pair of Fiery Confluences to wipe my board twice, and then I was in trouble. So, like, due to a couple lucky draws from my opponents and my fuck-up, I lost game 1. So, game 2, I revoke a Karn, and I win a long game. I don't know exactly what happens, but I can tell I'm at least 30 life at one point, so I think Brightling was involved. I think that was the game where, like, I just, like, play a Brightling, start attacking under a bridge and gaining a bunch of life, and I win that one. No basic planes. I just like derped. I like thought about activating Brightling, and I'm like, okay, so I gave it -3 power, so its power is currently -3, and, like, I just, like, totally derped for a minute, and it was just on me. I just, like, fucked up. I don't know if I was, like, tired after playing so much Magic, or if it was still early in the day or what, but, like, I just, like, mentally derped for a turn. So, moving on to game 3, we hit time because, like, game 2 was very, very intensive. Like, it like, took me a long time to win, but I did so. And then game 3, my opponent has Magus of the Moon and 1 card in hand when we hit turn 5. I have Lethal on board, and I reveal my hand to my opponent, which has Council's Judgment, Phyrexian Revoker, I think, like, Cataclysm in hand. And I just, like, reveal my hand to my opponent, and I say, do you want to concede? And my opponent says, no, I think I can win. Now, I don't know what were, like, if my opponent had said, like, no, I don't want to concede, I would have been okay with that. But, like, in what world do you think you can win against that hand exactly? Alright, fine. There. That's the end of that. So, I don't know, like, in what world, realistically, my opponent, like, actually thinks he could have won from that position. Because, like, with Magus of the Moon and 1 card in hand, and my hand being that stacked, and my board being great, I don't think there are any lines where they win. So I wasn't upset about my opponent not conceding, but I was kind of upset that my opponent said, no, I think I can win. That was ridiculous. Like, no, you couldn't. But that's fine. So this puts me into the draw bracket, which means I'm going to see weird stuff for the rest of the day. Which is why I was kind of surprised when I just got paired against Red Delver the next round. So my opponent is this kind of cheerful guy, but he's shuffling, like, painfully slowly. So he pile shuffles, then separates his cards into, like, 5 piles, and then takes 2 of the piles and shuffles them together, and takes 2 of the piles and shuffles together, and then takes the other pile and shuffles them into 1, and then takes the last 2 piles and shuffles them together. And it's taken like my opponent like 4 minutes to present. And I like look at the clock and I'm like, holy shit, this is why this guy is in the draw bracket. So my opponent mulligans game 1, I waste him off his bulk. That is his only mana source. And he had fetched a Valk intentionally so that he could like both cast his turn 1 threat and like cantrip afterwards, and he got super punished for it. He just like got stranded with a bunch of cantrips in hand, and he died. So game 2, my opponent miracles a Thunderous Wrath and puts me to 5. But then after that, I put a sort of Fire and Ice on a Batterskull, and he conceded. Wasn't a lot going on there. Although in between games, I actually called a judge to have my opponent to watch the pace of sideboarding for my opponent, because my opponent took like 3 minutes to sideboard, and then he started like doing the whole like pile shuffling like thing again, and I was like, no, this isn't good. So he got the cue after I called the judge over and picked things up a little bit, but like I was worried about not having enough time for the match after like having a 5-minute game 1, just because of how slowly he was like making his sideboarding and shuffling just like moves. Brightling might not be an MTG bot yet since it is brand new. Okay. So, this is embarrassing. I did not know what deck my opponent was on this round, and I sideboarded improperly, and I did not actually know what deck my opponent was on until after the match. So, game 1, I essentially like mana denial my opponent out of the game, and my opponent has played Swamp, 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 I think, some Edict Effect, and a Hymn to Turok. So I go, okay, my opponent is on Pox. And I think to myself, like, wow, that's really weird. 2 different Pox players in one weekend? That's so odd. And in game 2, I only see Swamps again. And I see weird cards, but they're all, like, reasonably things that would be in Pox. And I just, like, played a Thalia and then a Wingmare, and I had double port. Then my opponent, I think it's Decree of Justice. Is Decree of Justice the black one that when you cycle it, it gives all creatures -2, -2? Whatever, or no, Decree of Pain. My opponent cycles a Decree of Pain and wipes my board. And I go, that's one I've never seen in Pox before. That's kind of weird. And I like play out like a couple more taxation effects, and my opponent dies. And so, while we're de-sideboarding, I go like, all right, so why are you playing Pox? And my opponent goes, I'm not playing Pox, I'm playing Nick Fit. I just only drew Swamps, and you kept me off of mana for all of my cards that mattered. Like, every game I had things like Damnation in hand, but I just could never cast them. In neither game did you let me, like, play a 4-drop to, like, unlock the rest of my hand. Yeah, so, it was kind of embarrassing for me. And, like, kind of a sign of, like, how poorly my opponent had drawn. That, like, in neither game did he get a green, like, did he get or play a green source in order to play the like good portion of his deck. I just like kept him completely 100% off of his game plan. Okay. So next I get paired against Grixis Delver. My opponent goes double Delvers in game 1, and I think like blind flip ones, cantrips to get the other, and I die. Okay, that happens. Game 2, I keep a hand that is the following. This is approximate, but I think it's approximately Wasteland, Vile, Stoneforge, Mystic, Thalia, Path to Exile. So it is just like an absolutely insane Vile hand, and absolutely insane if I draw a white source. So the only way this hand falls apart is if my turn 1 Vile gets forced, and I'm on a play, so that's the only out there, is if the turn 1 Vile gets forced, or if I do not draw a white source in about the first 3 turns of the game. So my opponent has the turn 1 force, and then I don't draw a white source until about turn 5, and I die. It's like, okay, well, that's how we lose against Delver. Okay, so next round I get paired against Check Pile. And I'm very fine with playing this matchup. So, my opponent is facing lethal on board, I think. I played against Check Pile a handful of times this weekend, but the situation is approximately this. My opponent needs to Toxic Deluge this turn, or they die. And I know my opponent does not have the Deluge currently, or the resources to play it, due to their play pattern previously. So I go and like I play out one more card, and my opponent is in the spot where it is like, draw Deluge this turn or die. And my opponent like kind of does one of these sorts of things and draws the card, and I just like watch his eyes go, whoa. And he draws the Deluge, deluges my board, and starts to stabilize. And for the next 2 turns, I just like see his eyes do the same thing again as he gets like 2 disgusting rips in a row. And it just like takes me out of the game. So I had my opponent down to 3 life before he stabilized there with that Deluge. And then game 2 happens, and I'm like way ahead on board. I'm just like feeling absolutely great about my position, and I want to say my opponent was hellbent. Oh yes, that is exactly what happened. It was Heart of the Cards. So my opponent is hellbent or very close to it, and like things are looking bad, and my opponent draws and top decks Lily Last Hope. And it just like takes over the game and is an absolute beating. It was a very good round. Brightling was very good in both games, but I just could not get there. And so I took a loss there. And then my next and final round is versus Check Pile. So let me see how I should think about how I should put this. My opponent made a critical error and lost. My opponent was at a very, very low life total. My opponent was at, I think, 2 life. Okay. My opponent was at 2 life. And they had a Jace and a couple of removal spells. And I have, like, a Mother of Runes, something with 2 power, and I think a Mirran Crusader. So I think somehow or another they get like one of my creatures off the board. Okay, yeah, I think it was something like I don't remember the exact situation, but it's something like use a Lily Last Hope, target Mom. Mom has to protect itself. In response, like use a removal spell on my Crusader so that like the board of creatures can go and hold things down. And because like my opponent has like a Deathrite, or not a Deathrite Shaman, has like Leovold and Strix and Snapcaster Mage, versus I think it was like my Thalia and Mom. And my opponent passes the turn with 1 mana up. And I have Thalia in play. And I go, give Thalia Pro blue, and my opponent only has blue creatures untapped, and they die. And my opponent, like, reveals a lightning bolt and was like, oh my god, I was such an idiot. Because if they had, like, just removed the Thalia first, they could have, like, then removed the second creature that was threatening, and, like, 100% won that game. So they threw away game 1. I would have been a dog to win if they had sequenced that differently. I still could have snuck out a win, but it would have been much harder. Much, much harder. And then game 2, I had a very interesting hand. So, like, Zach Cock was done with his rounds, so he was watching me play this entire match, and afterwards, like, we just like talked for like 15 minutes about like sequencing in this game because it was really interesting. Essentially, in game 2, I had so many good cards that my opponent was doomed. Like, I had a Brightling, I had 2 pieces of equipment, I had a Cataclysm, I had double ports. Essentially, my hand was so good that I didn't need to Cataclysm for a while. But eventually I did, and wiped a whole bunch of lands off of my opponent, leaving them with a Tarmogoyf and 1 land to my Mirran Crusader and 2 lands, and they died to the Mirran Crusader. My opponent notably was playing the version of Pile that has Tarmogoyfs as a sideboard plan, which was scary, and took a little wiggling around. So my finish in the Legacy Classic was unimpressive by my standards. Like, 4-2-1 is kind of eh. Like, it really should have been 5-2, but I kind of, like, fucked up against Red Prison in round 2 there. So I'm unhappy with my play right here, and I made one other well, I shouldn't say I made one other mistake. I made one other clear error in this round. I played out an Ether Vial that I didn't need to play out, and I could have kept it in my hand to discard to a potential Reality Smasher. And a few turns later, my opponent did have a Reality Smasher. So, like, that was an error on my end. But otherwise, I'm very happy with how I played throughout the weekend. All right, NSEP Top, I see your question here. Let me say a few things about Brightling, and then I'll answer that question. Okay, so let's talk about Brightling. Lord Darkview, that was completely me being facetious. So essentially, at the end of this round here, the second to last round of the Open, or the Classic, like, a judge had sat down next to my match and was like kind of watching our match, and so I decided to just like do something funny and silly right before I conceded. So I had like something stupid like 8 lands. So I activated a port targeting my port, activated a second port targeting the first port, activated a wasteland targeting the first port, and then activated a wasteland targeting my wasteland, and then conceded with all of that on the stack. That was just me being silly. I was messing with you in chat. Alright, so Brightling is amazing. It is good against every generic archetype. Against combo, it is a faster clock than anything else in the deck on its own, because it hits for 5 a turn. Mirran Crusader hits for 4. So on its own, it provides more damage output than any other creature. And in those combo matchups, sometimes that lifelink is relevant, right? Like, if you are playing against Ant and you are gaining 5 life a turn, after a turn or 2 of that, there is a very real chance that their storm count just won't be high enough to kill you if they go off. And additionally, like, if they do something like empty the Warrens, and you can just gain, like, what, 4 life a turn, that offsets a lot of that and buys a ton of time. So, it's good against combo. It's good against control, because it protects itself, right? Like, every land in your deck, every white source in your deck becomes a Caracas for Brightling. So it's very, very good against control. It's not good against the card Baleful Strix, but just about everything else in control, it's got covered. And it's good against your tempo decks, right? Like, how does Delver beat 5 points of lifelink a turn? Well, they don't. So it is good against, like, all of the generic archetypes. There are cards and situations where it isn't good, but it's a very, very versatile threat. But here's the thing with Brightling. Despite how amazing it is, you do not want to draw very many of them. The second Brightling is so much worse than the first when it is in your hand, because one Brightling ties up a lot of your mana. You want to hold mana up to protect it, you want to be like using your mana to activate Brightling's abilities, because it takes over the game, warps the game around itself. So a second redundant Brightling isn't actually all that good. That's just like kind of the nature of the beast there. So I think 2 Brightlings is probably the correct number. I don't think in terms of mana investment you can really afford to have more copies than that. Like, it's a white-white threat, so you can't always cast it on turn 3, and you also don't always want to cast it on turn 3 anyway. It's a much better, like, vial this in on 3 or play this on turn 4 card so that you can hold it up with protection. It also means that you want more white sources in your deck, because, like, the bounce ability is so important. So in some ways you want to have, like, white available when you cast Brightling so that you can bounce it. So if you were kind of like on the fence about whether or not you'd play something like Benelish Marshal, for example, that has like a white mana cost, this is another example of something that's similar. The ceiling for Brightling is very, very high, and the floor for Brightling is still pretty darn high. There were very few times where I wished Brightling was a card other than Brightling, or at least another creature other than Brightling. Like, I did some testing against, like, Waterfalls, against 4-color Cascade, where, like, a Mirran Crusader is just, like, night and day better, but in most other matchups that I faced over the weekend, Brightling was just gas. It took over almost every game that it resolved, and there are a handful of Brightling stories that I just didn't tell here. Like, in case I didn't make it clear earlier, one of the biggest strengths of Brightling in the current metagame is that it can attack under an Ensnaring Bridge. So you can activate Brightling's ability 3 times to shrink it to 0 power, and then attack, and then you can pump and deal up to 5 damage. So if you have 8 mana, under an Ensnaring Bridge, you can attack for 5. And that should be enough to kill just about any Planeswalker, or enough to, like, really threaten your mono-red opponent. So Brightling is amazing right now in terms of, like, where it's fitting into the metagame. So Brightling competes for the Avenger and Crusader slots in the deck. I don't want to say this because this is hyperbole, but I think it largely replaces Serra Avenger in the deck. The cards are different. They have different strengths, but they're good and bad in the same places, but Brightling has higher upside in so many scenarios that I think Brightling's just better. I don't think you want to run Serra Avenger and Brightling together because they're both very bad against Baleful Strix, so that's something to, like, keep in mind when doing your deck building. Like, having some number of Crusaders that can just, like, ignore things like Strix and Leovold is very important. Okay, so to answer that question about frequency, um, you want Brightling when the games go long. So you don't need it as a 3 of so that you see it every game. As a 2 of is fine so that you'll see it in longer games where it will shine. You're fine drawing it early when you draw it early, but you're very happy to see it as the games start, ticking on to turns like 7, 8, and so forth. Yes, I think Brightling is going to be a legacy staple. I will throw my name behind that remark. Everyone who watched my matches went, "Wow, Brightling is insane." And I will say that after a few people watched my matches, there were no longer any copies of Brightling available in the entire convention center. So, take that for what you will. The card was bought out by people. Its ability to attack under Ensnaring Bridge and was awesome. And I think what people didn't realize when initially evaluating the card was that Brightling is a 10-point life swing per turn. So you hit for 5, and if you give it lifelink, you gain 5. So effectively, you've changed the life totals by 10 points. And that is an absurd degree of swing for any fair matchup. So, do you think Brightling is so mana dependent in a world full of Grixis, and when probably you have to use ports and wastelands? Sorry, just trying to understand that question. Okay, I think I get what you're saying. Brightling is very mana intensive, and it sort of changes what your endgame mana sink is. So a lot of times, D&T focuses on just keeping the clamps on tight with things like Rishadenport and Wasteland. But a lot of times when you draw Brightling, the game focuses so narrowly around it that you just stop restricting their mana and you start just beating them to death with Brightling while leaving up a mana or 2 to protect it. And that's okay because it's such a board dominating card. I do wonder if playing Brightling means that I should support it better. So this is probably too cute, but for example, what if you play Sword of Feast and Famine? Oh, I get to untap all of my lands, so it doesn't matter if I use, a couple of mana to pump Brightling up, and a couple mana to give it Vigilance and Lifelink, because I will just untap all of my lands, and then I can use them again on your turn, or use my lands to port afterwards. That's probably way too cute, but it's the sort of thing that I'm thinking about. So Brightling gets brickwalled by a couple of things. It gets brickwalled by True Name Nemesis, and it gets brickwalled by Baleful Strix. There are others, but those are the 2 primary ones. So I'm going to spend some time thinking about if I want to make any changes to the deck list in order to try to deal with those issues. Oh, good. I am glad that you filled out the Google form. I am really looking forward to some exhibition matches. So for anyone who didn't see the article that I posted earlier today, I posted a ThrabenU University 2-year retrospective, and I talked about some of the things that I've done in the last year. And I sent out a form with that says hey, do you want to play some matches on stream against me? If so, here is your way to do it. And what I'm trying to get together is a fair number of high-level players who can showcase their decks and really help me to create some top-notch legacy content for all the fans. So I'm looking for the Julians and the Bryant Cooks and the Bob Huangs and the Anurag Das's of the world. Let's get some legacy enthusiasts together and let's jam some games. For a lot of people, we'll be able to stream both sides of the matchup, or at least give you some high-level play from my perspective against a great player. Hey, I'm considering every application that I get. You know, if you're a Legacy enthusiast, and you've done something good in Legacy in your lifetime, I will absolutely consider you. I'm reading every application I get. Okay. Do I think Brightling can see play anywhere else? Well, Anurag posted a status today after we chatted a bit about trying Brightling in Miracles. So maybe. I like realistically. Negator77. Oh, you're the sort of person I think would be good for this. I'm looking for people who want to play matches against me on stream to showcase some various like exhibition matches of like legacy decks. All the details are available on my Thraben University 2-year retrospective article that went up today, and there's a Google form if you're interested in doing that. Yes, you missed the entire Brightling discussion. It just ended. Short version, Brightling is insane. Buy 2 copies, play test with it, and play 24 lands. Card's great. But sorry, back to Brightling for one more minute, just to like finish up my thoughts there. I do think Brightling can see play in like D&T or a specifically blue-white Stoneblade deck or a Miracles deck. I think those are the only decks that run enough white sources to justify like trying out a Brightling, despite how good the card is. I think the card has a lot of promise and potential. Oh, and I found a sweet Thalia cosplayer. I'm sure you've all figured that out by now, but that was awesome. Was very happy to find that. I actually don't know. I think he's a shapeshifter. Chat seems to confirm that it is a shapeshifter. Okay, chat, I need to refill my water bottle here. That was a lot of talking there. How much talking was that? Just so I have a perspective for how long that took. 1 hour and 27 minutes. That was a long tournament report. Well, yeah, I guess that's kind of a podcast for some people then. All right, I'm gonna just like take a quick break here, kind of like rest my voice for a minute, get some water, and then since this took so long, I think I'm just gonna jam a league with Red Prison rather than D&T, so that I can like actually try to get through a league tonight. Help Psy Kangaroo. Would I make any changes to the deck list or sideboard after the weekend? No, deck list was great. Brightling will be released at the beginning of July. It'll be in treasure chests, I think, along with the M19 stuff when that gets released. Yeah, I probably just should have planned on doing this tournament report and calling that a stream for tonight. I didn't realize that it was going to take this long to do. But I played in 4 different events over the weekend, so I guess that that makes sense. Am I in the wrong when I'm thinking that D&T isn't all that great anymore? D&T is still a good deck. It is still a tier 1 or tier 2 deck, depending on how strictly or loosely you want to define those. But it was maybe the best deck in the format for a long time, or maybe second best deck. D&T kind of had a heyday around the time right before Miracles got banned, where good D&T players could bully Miracles while being very good against the rest of the format. So D&T just felt amazing. And now that decks are getting better at fighting against D&T, D&T is kind of back to where it was before, where it's just good instead of the best deck in the format. So in comparison to where it's been in the past, it's definitely worse now, but it's still a fine deck choice. Oh, thank you very much for your resubscription. 4 months is a long time. I appreciate your support. And I did have a great time at the con. SCG Con was awesome. I am very much looking forward to the next one. Yeah, if anything is making things harder for D&T right now, it's the ridiculously powerful and mana-efficient cards that have been printed in the last couple of years that are also very flexible. Like Abrade and Lily on the Last Hope and Toxic Deluge and Culligan's Command. These cards becoming more popular has made things a little bit harder than it used to be. Oh yeah, the more K commands are in a format, the worse D&D is, just unquestionably. All right, let's battle. I want to relax and play some Red Prison. I don't think my brain can take any D&T right now after an hour and a half of talking D&T. It's also really disappointing that Brightling isn't out yet, because Brightling is a game changer for D&T. That card is very good. That card has huge implications on matchup percentages across the board. So it's very sad to not be able to play with that toy after getting to play with it all weekend. I respect Barbara a lot, but Stoneforge Mystic is still one of the best cards in the deck. Not close. I tried for weeks without it. I liked the experimentation that he did. I think he had a lot of great ideas, but Stoneforge Mystic is just way, way too important to your win percentage in the Grixis Delver matchup, which is the best deck in the format right now. So it's too important. It needs to stay. Yeah, Mark hasn't been streaming a lot recently. I don't know if he got busy with real life or what, but I'd love to see more of his matches. Just haven't gotten any alerts that he's been live. We'll get our Rip Bear soon. Oh, okay. So he's on a trip. That's why there hasn't been any streaming. That makes sense. Well, good for him. Having a real life is important, and finding that balance in your Magic career, so to speak, matters a lot. Palladion, I am not saying those cards should not have been printed. They were great cards. They were wonderful for Legacy as a whole. They're just like some of them are absolutely brutal against my deck. Yeah, 100% agreed. I am very happy to see extremely powerful and pushed Magic cards printed. The new recruiter guy is unplayable. Alright, so I think my opponent plays Bug Delver. This hand does nothing. I mulligan. This hand also does nothing, and I mulligan. This is a keep. That's interesting. How YOLO am I willing to go? Because I can go like super YOLO, turn 1, Snow-Covered Mountain, Chrome Mox, Imprint Chandra, cast Chalice on 1, have Simian Spirit Guide for days. If not, turn 2 Ensnaring Bridge. I'm doing it. I don't think I can win this game very easily trying to fight fair. Don't him me. Oh, maybe this is actually Pile and not Delver. I mean, there was a... God, is my opponent just gonna, like, naturally have a fucking Jace here? That is so tilting. M19 is probably going to have a lot of cards that have legacy potential if they keep going for this, like, really pushed but mana-intensive theme that they're going for. Like, a 5-mana 10/10 is crazy, right? Like, that is absolutely bonkers by legacy standards. And, like, that's just a dude. Yes, TLDR on Brightling is, it's good, play 2. If you want the long version, there's an hour-and-a-half tournament report for you to listen to later. Alright. So I'm going to want these spyglasses. Not gonna want these bridges. Probably want this fiery confluence. And then I have to make a decision about how many Scab Clan Berserkers I want. Basic Planes, in one place or another, send me a link to that Soldier Stomp before Winter Orb deck list. I'm intrigued. Yeah, Arkin, I did like an hour and a half worth of talking about D&T just now, so I was not in the mood to play something more brain intensive right now. Is Infernal Judgment really good though? Because you only want it against Chalice decks. Ooh, this is a Force of Will check hand, right? So I go City, Mox, Imprint, Spirit Guide, Exile, Spirit Guide, Chandra. I accept Force of Will check hand. Actually, I might just like Blood Moon turn 1, and then Chandra turn 2. That's probably better. Because this draws out the Force if my opponent has one. Yeah. So my opponent just showed me a Spell Pierce. If I play Ancient Tomb, I can lose a land, but play Chandra around Spell Pierce, so I should probably do so. Jeez, second Force of Will. Bloodstained Mire is not going to fetch an island. I can tell you that. Him away my mountain. We're not dead. Like, I have a ton of Haymakers in my deck, and any one of them I draw is going to be cripplingly good against my opponent. Like, until they have a basic island, my moons are devastating. And even this is somewhat annoying. Like, my opponent can't push the Rabble Master here, so I'm at least going to create one token that's going to stick around. fuck it. Show me a Snapcaster Mage. Nope, just get punched in the face. Very surprised that my opponent fetched Trop there. Like, if they're gonna win this game, don't they have to do something that lets them play for the long game, which would mean getting Island? Oh man, Gutter Snipe is sweet. I played with that card a lot in Limited. Okay. Opponent, like, absolutely must have drawn that Snapcaster Mage off of Baleful Strix, otherwise their turn should have started off with, like, Snapcaster for Ponder trying to answer Rabblemaster. Ugh, Walking Ballista. Triggered. I like the parts where my opponent pauses for a very, very long time, thinking about their inevitable death. And we'll take no attack with Rabblemaster here. We don't want to, like, just let that go. Yep, that makes sense to me. I think I will play this city here in case I get hemmed. I really like that Gigantosaurus. Like, a 5-mana 10/10 that, like, rustles the young Magic player within my heart and makes me go, oh man, it's so big! Look at how big it is! Yeah, that Rector could see play in Nick Fit, but that's about it. That's just kind of the format. Stupid Deathrite Shaman being so good. Well, this is a start. So I can play this Chandra, and I can just, like, plus this Chandra and, like, make the fight about this. I don't want to, like, minus it on the Deathrite, because if I do so, then it just dies. You're not sure how good a 5-mana 10/10 is, though? I mean, Strix exists. Yeah, but it's a 5-mana 10/10. How can it not be good? It's so big. All those Eldrazi players, they're playing 5 mana for a 5/5. This is 5 mana for a 10/10. How can that not be good? That's annoying. That was like the perfect top deck. Yeah, so like, this is why Deathray Shaman needs to be banned, right? Like, this is a 1-drop accelerator in the early game that, like, blocks small threats and gains life or just kills you as well. So frustrating. Siege Rhino is a sweet card. I have enjoyed the crap out of that card. I'm fine with trading a Spirit Guide for one of these bodies right here. Grizzlebrand is perfectly fair by Legacy standards. It's just like one of the best fatties that you can sneak in. It is absolutely no more egregious than, like, Emrakul, for example. Hey, Goblin Lackey. It's great meeting you this weekend, by the way. Well, that's pretty good. The English language is very large. Let's see if we can find good ways to talk about things we don't like that don't involve things like AIDS and cancer. Rubbish is wonderful. Did my opponent just, like, Hydroblast a Moon instead of a Chandra? Does that mean my opponent's last card is just like a Snapcaster Mage and they're just gonna, like, Snapcaster Blast Chandra? Nope, okay. I don't really think they cared about the Moon. If you say the word Progenitus too many times, you summon Julian. I think that's how that works. Right, yeah, I understand that. TDMCP. But if they just had one blast effect, don't they just, like, blast the Chandra and accept the Moon, and then just, like, not worry about their life total and just, like, Jace Fate Seal me off of Fiery Confluence? Okay, so effectively they did have a Snapcaster Mage. That's fine. Yeah, I mean, Take Command is really, really good. Opponent's got it all over there, but I can't concede, because if they don't start Fate Sailing me, then, like, I just draw a Fiery Confluence and they die. Okay, well, I guess that Bolt put a Magus into the graveyard, so, like, they're effectively at 8 health. I will trade that there. These goblins are never getting through for the rest of the game. I'm playing the second main phase so that the goblin I currently have doesn't die. Why are you even Force of Willing this? What does this Goblin Rabblemaster do on the current board? I think the answer is nothing, and that's a poor use of a Force of Will. Also, like, why in the hell am I not being Fate Sealed? This is where they slam the Scarab God and take over. Scarab God would be okay here, but there aren't that many creatures left in the graveyard, so they'd have to get my Rabblemaster. Was Scarab Master taking Rabble Master something that could have happened in Standard? Because that'd be hilarious. Okay, fine. Next match. So for anyone who doesn't know me, hello, my name is Phil Gallagher. I run ThrabenU University, a site dedicated to legacy D&T. Earlier today, on this stream, I spent about an hour and a half talking about SCG Con and Brightling in D&T. So if you missed that and you're interested in that sort of content, check out the replay either on YouTube or Twitch later today. My stream schedule has gotten a little wonky due to the summer, so like starting this week I'll be breaking my normal stream times. I don't really know when I'll be streaming. I will be streaming, and it will be somewhat frequently, but it just won't be during regular hours anymore due to me moving and my summer job starting up. So if you haven't already followed, this is probably a great time to do so. I am on the play. This hand produces a turn 1 Chalice of the Void, so I keep it. And you might say, Phil, what happens if that Chalice doesn't resolve? And to you I say, what happens if it does resolve? We're a master. Now we just need to top deck one more land, and then I'll have my opponent on a 3-turn clock. Because Rabble Master on its own is a 4-turn clock, but when you play the second Rabble Master, it turns into a 3-turn clock. Skillfully navigated. I'm gonna do the higher upside play first. Tasty. Ensnaring Bridge? Simian Spirit Guide. No, I don't want to cast that. So the sort of like bad news for my opponent is that if they go and attack this Chandra, then Rabble Master clocks them for a ton. Or they can just like have Decay into Bolt and just fucking mise me. Well, that's pretty great. Still plus this first to see what happens. I find it 100% acceptable to take a turn off from the bridge thing to cast this Trinisphere. Trinisphere is so good against these sorts of decks. That's tricky. I can, like... No, I'm not gonna do it. High upside plays, let's go. My opponent can pay 3 mana and a card to force. Yep. So, like, if I go for the Magus there, then I shut my opponent off of their mana if they let it resolve, but if they just have something silly like a Bolt, then I lose my Chandra and my Magus for, like, minimal resources. So, like, I took a high upside play that didn't work out. And now this one resolves. And I probably win this race. So my opponent has me on a 6-turn clock, I have them on a 6-turn clock, but it's more likely that I will get something that matters before they do. Now I have a redundant Trinisphere, which I don't really need, but I'm playing it out, like, for Karn reasons, and for future Ensnaring Bridge reasons. Something as stupid as a Simian Spirit Guide changes the clock in my favor. Let's go. And now we wait. Alright, so what do I need to set Chalice on? I guess one stops Lightning Bolt, which can put the clock in their favor. Militia Burglar is unplayable. It's not a question. It doesn't get Flicker Wisp, it's just, like, so much worse than Recruiter for that reason. Well, Strix and K-Command are already stopped because of mana. So I just, like, picked the card that I care about, which I think is Lightning Bolt. Because then, like, okay, so opponent can now cast a Snapcaster Mage as an Ambush Viper, for example. Oh, great, and they do have Snapcaster Mage. That sucks for me. Because that means they have, like, Snapcaster and Lightning Bolt. And so I'm just dead to True Name alone. That's devastating. So I'm 100% dead to Snap, then it is correct to attack in with both of these. Oh wait, no. So I have this Chalice on here. So if they have Snap, and I attack... Alright, so if they have Snap, and I attack in with both of these, then I am not dead on the crackback. But they are. So this puts my opponent to 1, or they trade. I think I'm obligated to attack. Yeah, I'm obligated to attack. Just doesn't feel good. Yep. Alright, so I need a Fiery Confluence, a Chandra, or a Goblin Rabblemaster, or an Ensnaring Bridge. No whammy. Hot damn. I'm playing out my lands so that if they do something like draw Swamp, play Baleful Strix, I won't die if I draw 2 lands in a row. An opponent cannot force this or they die. Yay! Alright. So what do? Confluence in, Spyglass in, I went Bridges out, 1 Berserker in. Yeah, but if I do it for 3, I shut off all these cards. And that's so sad for me. A Goblin Rabblemaster plus Bridge over 2 turns beats True Name, because I just, like, play out my card, collect a Goblin token, then next turn keep my card, attack with 2 Goblin tokens. So, like, that matters. So, like, it's non-zero relevance. On the draw, I could also consider cutting some of my fast mana for more Scab Clan Berserkers. I don't know that it's 100%. It's probably very close to 100%, though. I should potentially trim some Chrome Mox for more copies of Scab Clan Berserker. But I guess it's not the best against Strix. But the fast mana isn't as relevant when the game goes long. Well, this hand is great. Turn 1 Chalice, turn 2 Rabble Master, turn 3 Fiery Confluence or Sorcerous Spyglass. Deal. If my opponent didn't play Deathrite Shaman, I would have been really tempted to just, like, jam Rabble Master on 1. I'm getting so tired of, like, turn 1 Deathrite Shaman into turn 2 True Name Nemesis. Like, now I'm just going to take 5 a turn for the rest of the game. And die. I mean, we mostly need my opponent not to have a Culligan's Command, because if they go, like, eat this Culligan's Command, blow up Rabble Master, kill Chalice, I'm just out of the game. Karn is interesting. So I can Karn plus try to find something, put it to 6 loyalty. And just, like, work on getting a bridge and take over the game that way. I can also, like, Karn minus double Spirit Guide to Sorcerous Spyglass something, create a 3/3, turn it into a 4/4, and try to, like, turn the aggro game into my favor. I think I'm going to Sorcerous Spyglass and see what things look like. Because I can still Karn afterwards. Two Shamans, a Push, and a Ponder. Okay. Think I'm going to name Deathrite Shaman. My opponent says the Chalice hurts for sure. You want to leave the board empty with true name on it? It seems sketchy. I'm doing well, Static Rip. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to plus or minus this Karn. If I minus, I just make a 3/3, and then I attack my opponent for 3, 6, and then I dome them for another 6. That might be good enough. Oh, because it has a damage on it. I see. Yeah. I get what you're saying. Going aggro. Alright, chat agrees with making a dude. And I think I don't play the... Or actually, do I just, like, play the Fiery Confluence, deal 1, hit them for 4 now? Just, like, get the Deathrite Shaman out of the way? That's probably fine. Alright, so how much do I hit for this turn? I hit for not lethal this turn if I just go in. So I think I'm going to wait till next turn and just go for lethal in one go. So here I can just... Because if I swing in, my opponent blocks Rabblemaster, takes a hit from Construct and Idiot. Actually, maybe that's fine. Like, I just let them kill the Rabblemaster and then have them at 1, and then I have, like, Construct and Magus to attack in the following turn. That's probably good enough. No, I think I like putting them to 1. Then it shuts off things like fetch lands if Magus disappears, and it shuts off, like, Deluge. Like, now I have 3 bodies. My opponent can't, like, deal with all of them. Yeah, force being off as well matters. Alright, chat, I'm going to take 30 seconds and run to the restroom, and then we'll go into round 3. Good guys win, Arkin. We beat turn 2 True Name Nemesis off of Deathrite Shaman. We are the good guys. We just mooned and jaliced. That makes us the good guys. Right? Chat? Chat? We're the good guys, right? Maybe. We might be the bad guys. I'm okay with being the bad guys sometime. Alright, good evening, folks. My name's Phil Gallagher. I run Thraben University. If you're not familiar with it, it's a site for legacy, death, and taxes. And I put up a new article today, kind of like doing a 2-year retrospective of the site and the stream's progress. Notably, for many of you, I have a link to a Google form in there. I want people to do exhibition matches with me to kind of like show off my decks versus various other decks at a high level. So if that's something that interests you, you can go ahead and check out Thraben University's articles tab and apply that way. My hand does things. I am keeping it. I don't know how exactly we'll YOLO. It depends on what my opponent does. My opponent is lands. Well, my hand's great. So I actually think I want to turn 1 Rabble Master, and then turn 2 Magus, and then turn 3 Magus. Because if I play Rabble Master on turn 1, my, like, I guess I can just, like, imprint Rabble Master and just, like, play Magus after Magus after Magus if one fails. I'm not going to turn 1 Bridge. I think there is an argument for, like, turn 1 Rabble Master, see if they have Punishing Fire in hand. If they do, play Magus appropriately. Because, like, as the hand stands, I can turn 1 Rabble Master into turn 2 Magus. Gracefully Balding, thank you very much for subscribing. I appreciate your support. I hope you're enjoying this legacy content. There's going to be a lot more this summer. and I'm really looking forward to like doing something great with the exhibition matches. All right. Well, good news for people named Phil. I'm super rewarded for the line I took. Now this shuts off Maze of Ith and prevents it from, like, stopping Rabblemaster. And Moxall, thank you very much for your continued support. Please don't Punishing Fire my Magus and produce a 2020 before I can play this Ensnaring Bridge. I don't care if you Punishing Fire this Magus after I Ensnaring Bridge. There's only 6 cards in the graveyard. Oh, that's the 7th card. Tabernacle is not going to do quite what you want here. I was worried that my opponent was going to have... no, I guess it doesn't matter if they have Barbarian Ring, because it's a mountain. I think Spyglass seems good. I think Berserker's probably reasonable. Chaos Warp's probably reasonable. The Confluence is a maybe. The sideboarding notes I have from Zach essentially say that he sideboards almost nothing. And he just, like, approaches it the same way. Like, I guess since Scab Clan is bad against Punishing Fire in, like, prior to being renowned, so I get that. I don't really think Fiery Confluence is good. Is there anything else I want to board out? Most of this stuff looks reasonable. No, I guess I could just ship this back as is. Maybe when I'm on the draw, I'll consider Scab Clans. Yeah, we have Bridge for Tracker. They have Gamble, too. Do have Gamble. I guess I should have done this with... no, I guess it's doing it better is better with Tomb in case, like, the Magus gets removed. K-Fons, thank you very much for hosting. I appreciate your support. I mean, opponent now needs a Punishing Fire and a Krosan Grip to get there. Alright, so they have the Krosan Grip. What do I even need to name? Like, all their lands are mountains right now. And if they... I guess I name Wasteland. Because if they Punishing Fire... they might not be able to K-Grip in the same... Nah, they're pretty good on the mana department. It doesn't really matter what I name. Ooh, so, alright, Sulfuric Vortex is a good one. Or not Sulfuric Vortex, Molten Vortex. Let's do that, because I don't have a Chalice yet. A Cycling Land also would have been acceptable. If I Karn minus, I create a 4/4. I'll have 3 cards in hand. Next turn I can plus Karn, get another card, and then attack in, and then have my opponent on a 2-turn clock that way. But I should probably just like Karn plus and look for another Bridge or another Magus. That probably locks things up better. There's a Chandra. Sure. Let's see. So I can Karn minus, get Chandra, play Chandra for 4, and then play Trinisphere, or I can just like Karn minus, then play Trinisphere. How do I not die to a Punishing Fire? Like this turn I do just die to a Punishing Fire. I don't think my opponent has it yet. I guess if I go Karn minus this turn, and then go Karn minus the next turn, they are on a 2-turn clock. Well, 2 more turns. So it's a question of, like, do I want to dig with Karn, or do I want to try to give my opponent fewer draws? Alright, I think I'm gonna do this. I will cast the crap out of that. Cast for 2. That stops punishing fire. Of course. Of course. Alright, Karn. Hit bridge for me, buddy. He did not hit bridge. Is closing the game better than just playing Karn? Like, am I supposed, like, on the play, am I supposed to just have, like, Scab Clan Berserkers to just, like, try to aggro my opponent out after playing some of this stuff? My sideboard notes say no, but my heart isn't totally sure. Like, if I get that counter on Scab Clan, it's good against Punishing Fire, it's good against Loam. That is an if, though. I'm gonna run it as is, but I'm not sure. This actually might be a keep. This goes Chrome Mox, Imprint Magus, Chalice on 0, Exile Spirit Guide, Chalice on 1. Is that insane? Like, my opponent won't get to Mox, they won't get to Gamble, they won't get to Crop Rotate, they won't get to Exploration. I'm stuck with only 1 mana source, but I might just totally cripple their opener. Is it good crazy or bad crazy, though? It's not a safe hand. It is a risky hand. Bear with 2 guns. Let's keep the language clean. That's really pushing it as far as what is acceptable. I will ban you if you say something like that again. So, like, I don't really care about my tickets online or anything like that, so I want to keep this one to see where this goes. Well, so it's clear that I was messing with my opponent's opener quite a bit. But blanking on lands forever is rough. Now my opponent can just go like crop rotation, kill me. Yep, okay. I do not regret keeping that to try that out. That was a super interesting hand. Yeah, and that's why it's like worth consideration to keep that, right? I don't need to make the land drops immediately if, like, I suspect that, like, cripples my opponent's opener. Oh, we have a lot of mana sources. It's an absurd number. So it's 19 lands plus 4 Chrome Mox plus 4 Spirit Guides. So we have 19, 23, we have 27 mana sources, and we had 25 remaining in the deck. So, like, odds were very good to hit mana sources. We just didn't. And we don't even need to hit 2, right? Like, we can hit any one of these to go ham. Okay, so, like, kind of Grand Arbiter, right? But, like, after 2 draws, they're live? Oh, no. You're saying because of Chalice, I see. Oh, hey. It's my weekly game versus you again. So I'm going to get to go... Well, it'll depend. Like, my opponent plays, like, D&T and Maverick, so... Like, what I do is kind of dependent on what they do. But I'll have turn 2 Magus or Rabble Master. Probably Rabble Master into... And if I do Rabble Master, I can do turn 3 Karn. Or Rabble Master into Rabble Master and have a 3-turn clock if my opponent doesn't have anything to say about it. No, Shalrima. My opponent is a regular of the stream and an honorable person. They leave whenever we get paired. Opponent is 100% not ghosting. But thank you for letting me, like, potentially know. I do appreciate the concern. Ooh. Well, I guess that was happening either way. What does that do? Okay, so I can play land, play Chandra. So I can play land, play Chandra, plus for mana, Chromox, Imprint, Rabblemaster, play Magus. That seems pretty disgusting. Alternatively, I can just, like, take this slower and not waste my resources and just, like, moon them right here, play a land, attack for 1, then next turn, Chandra minus, kill Dryad Arbor, or something of that ilk. I might be, like, getting too aggressive with the Chandra. Like, if I just, like, give up using this Chromox for this 1 turn, then I don't lose any of these 3 cards. And I feel like I'm pretty well equipped to fight a fair fight here. Shoot, second P-Fire. And Wasteland, devastating. So Chromox, Imprint, Rabblemaster, Chandra, plus goes to 5. I hold back my Goblin, and then next turn I go Chandra plus Chalice on 2. Seems sweet. Wrong nap. That's pretty good tech. No, I think playing the Chalice is super important there. The Punishing Fires just start taking over the game if I don't answer them. Did something good. That qualifies. We forgot to return Punishing Fire there. That might be punishing. I hate myself. That's annoying. That Lily is probably going to beat me. Because it can ultimate before my Chandra can ultimate. No, Chandra says damage to each opponent. But this second Chandra might mean that I can just, like, keep going to my opponent's dome. So I can just hit my opponent to 6 here, play a second Chandra, hit my opponent to 4, and then I race the Lily successfully. Right? This puts my opponent to 6. I do this, it puts it to 4. I guess they plus to 6. Then I plus put them to 2. Maybe it doesn't. So maybe I do want to play the Magus. Sorry, I need to think about this for a second. I think I'm not going to cast this. Because then a Fiery Confluence is lethal. I don't need to cast that. So I think I cast a second Chalice on 2. No, I guess if I cast a second Chalice on 2. No, I guess I do. If I cast a second Chalice on 2, and my opponent needs to put a Chandra in a pile without a Chalice, so yeah. I think this was a poor split. Isn't my opponent supposed to go Chandra and a good number of mana sources versus? So now I have to sacrifice my Chandra pile so that my opponent's stuff can't attack and just run me over. My opponent also could have, like, split the lands differently to put my... I guess I cast this. To put my Ancient, or my Grand Furnace in this pile so that it could have been wastelanded. Yeah, like... Huh. Whatever this is, I don't like it. Can't be good for me. Is he just trolling me? Or does he, like, he actually have some, like, giant, stupid shit? Green Sun Senate for a billion D? Get Sigarda? Oh god. That's pretty good. How do I win? Unsure how I win due to this Cabal pit. We legitimately might deck this game. I really hope my opponent, like, thins with knights a couple of times. like cast a green sun or something. Oh shit, please don't have Teague. Okay, that's fine. Because if my opponent has Teague, then I can't cast the 4 drops. And then I can start to run into some trouble. Okay, another Lily would be very good. Yes, I do have burn. However, my burn is at 4 mana. It is my current plan to deck my opponent. However, I need them to play a couple more cards to make that happen. Okay, now I don't think I can win. No, 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 no. I'll eventually draw these and then my opponent can attack. These are cards I'll consider. Chalice of the Void's pretty bad. Okay, yeah, if my opponent just, like, keeps Green Sun Zenithing for a small number, that could get there and keep them from decking, but I could just, like... No, I can't Chalice on all the numbers to, like, stop that from happening. They can just cast it for, like, 11 or something. So I want those 7 cards out. I guess I want these 7 cards in. Like, there's some world where I want Chalice to stop Punishing Fire, but that only stops Rabblemaster and Magus. It doesn't stop this stuff. I guess it's kind of annoying for that stuff, too. Like, shutting off Punishing Fire does matter. But maybe I'm trying to shut that off via Blood Moon and Magus of the Moon rather than any other means. I think I'm going to submit like this. This is a bad hand. But I'm going to keep because I can just go like turn 2 Karn. Or turn 2 Kozilek's Return. Chromox can go to the bottom. So I'm going to play Ancient Tomb on turn 1 and pass to maximize the chances of going turn 2 Karn if my opponent doesn't play some sort of bird. Morning. Well, Evening for me, but morning for you. And since my hand sucks, I'm just going up with Karn. We are playing against Agrolome. A 3/3 Knight of the Reliquary, you say. Alright, what's my card that's in exile? My card that's in exile is just a mountain. So I can actually just probably get to the point where this can't attack, right? I can Chrome Mox, imprint this, play bridge. That puts me with 3 cards in hand. So I can take 1 hit. And I can also, like, Karn make a 3/3. Oh, and I can play a land. Okay. So if I minus Karn, I make a 3/3. If my opponent has, like, a removal spell for that, then I just lose the Karn, though. Or no, I'm supposed to play a land. That's what I was missing in this picture. I knew everything seemed off for some reason. I could have just, like, also Kozilek's returned for 0 value there with my floating mana, but that didn't seem good. I also guess I didn't need to tap this Ancient Tomb. I forget how exactly my sequencing went. If we plus Karn, we go up to a 3rd card in hand, and then the Knight can attack. I'm fine with jumping here. So I can Karn minus again, create a 3/3, block, end of turn, Kozilek's return the Knight, maybe kill it. It's gonna be fine. We're probably gonna get like bonus additional value out of this causal X return for being scrubs and doing it poorly. I'm like super tired after this weekend. So I am not claiming to be playing optimally right now. Hey, that ain't bad. Alright, so I'm probably gonna land. Opponent says yikes. Double punishing fire card? Nope, just keep me from making a construct, I guess. I played in the Legacy Classic. I got 21st, which is acceptable. Nothing flashy. Not what I was going for. Bob. Now there's all sorts of goodies with silver counters on them. Alright, so I get a bridge. There's a Chandra there that'll probably get next turn now. Alright, and I can kind of like play Sword and Shield with this bridge. Where like I have the ability to like plus my Karn, get 2 cards in hand, attack with the team. What? Alright, didn't expect that. This second Karn's neat. I'm going to Karn minus. I'll get my Chandra. I guess I can attack. No, we can do this cleanly. Yeah, there was a surprising amount of check pile there. I will say that. This is fine. Not great, but fine. So I actually might just want this as a red card to imprint to my Mox. So that I can turn one and Braid without losing Magus. I don't know why that had to happen right there. I'm just gonna go Mount and go. So as to not expose... No, I'll if I play this, I can abrade on my opponent's turn if they play a threat, but if I play this, my opponent can decay it. I think I'll not play it. Well, that's annoying. That's a very good draw. Yes, Fire Confluence used to be a lot better. A lot better. Alright, so that's Life from the Loam, get back 2 fetches. Sylvan Library. So this is probably where I just discard Kozilek's Return. And slam a Magus. Unless my opponent's dead. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12, not dead yet. So this can attack Liliana and kill it, because it'll be 4. And this can attack my opponent, and this can attack my opponent. That is a big boy. I can kill it if I need to. Alright, so what do I do this turn? What happens if I attack in with everything? If I attack in with everything, my opponent blocks the Rabbles. They take 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I dome them and they die. Unless they have a removal spell, in which case it'll take me 2 turns to kill them. What if they have Punishing Fire? If they have Punishing Fire and they main phase Punishing Fire me, then I just, like, don't go to attacks. And I play Chandra. Six damage. Opponent says womp womp. Oh, lethal. That's better than my line. It usually is. Okay, chat. I am absolutely exhausted. I'm going to go ahead and call it a night here. And I'm going to turn you over to my good friend Romario, who had a pretty good run at the Duel for Duels at SCG Con. He was playing Turbo Depths then, although he normally plays Sylvan Plug. Check out his channel. It's good stuff. I am going to watch some of that and go to bed. I will be back at some point tomorrow afternoon with a Stoneblade list of some nature. I've got to work through my donation queue before I get started with Latin Academy. If you enjoyed my legacy content tonight, please follow, and if you're really enjoying what I'm doing, please subscribe so that you can support me and continue to push me doing what I'm doing. Good night, folks.